Hello, and thank you for attending the new Office of Election training for Chesterfield County. If you are reviewing this training and going through this training online without the benefit of an in-person class, then you will need to complete a quiz at the end of the training so that you can certify that you actually did complete the training for the election prior to working. The training should take about an hour to complete. However, with a recording, you do have the ability to pause and to fast forward if you need to step away for some reason. But this is for brand new officers who've never worked before. This is the training to allow you to actually work on election day. It is a state requirement. So without further ado, we will begin the PowerPoint for the new officer of election training. So our theme for 2020 is confidently elevating elections, excellence in elections, Chesterfield County. I am Constance Hargrove, the General Registrar and Director of Elections for Chesterfield County. The intent of this training is to provide you a broad overview of election day. There is no way in one sitting or even a couple of sittings that I can provide you all of the information that you will need to be an experienced officer on election day. However, the training is intended to provide you a broad overview and resources and documents and places where you can find the answers to any questions that you may have on election day. Please be assured that the Chief Officer of Election and the Deputy Chief Officer of Election have been trained and provided additional information that they need and that you will need on election day to conduct the election in a fair and impartial manner. Each county and city in the state of Virginia has a 3-member electoral board, and the makeup of the board is defined by the Code of Virginia. The current board has 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. The board makeup is that 2 members of the party of the current sitting governor are appointed to the board and 1 member of the other party, which is why we end up with 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. So we have Susan Bills, who is our Republican member. Caroline Emmons is one of our Democratic members, and Rosemary Hart is the other Democratic member of the electoral board. The training will flow as follows. We have election day overview. So you will be presented information that happens between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. on election day. So please understand that the polls do close at 7 p.m. However, that doesn't mean that you leave at 7 p.m. And there may be elections where you may still have people in line at 7 p.m. Those voters have to be allowed to vote before you actually close the polls. 8 p.m. is a good number for a small election. That gives you the opportunity to close down all the equipment, pack everything back up, take down the signs, and clean up the polling place to get ready to leave on election night. The second part of the training are a series of equipment operation videos and a video that walks you through packing and unpacking the cage. It just kind of gives you an idea of what is in the cage, the supplies that you will have on election day. And then finally, we will discuss some of the things that we've gone on through the training and then some reminders. So during the day on election day, you have different things that you need to know. In your election day guide, you will find the following reminders and some additional reminders. This is just a few. That you need to arrive at the polling place no later than 5 a.m. If you're a registered voter, if you're registered to vote, but you're not working in your polling place on election day, then you need to vote absentee. And then you need to make sure that you sign all paperwork before leaving the polls on election day. Some other reminders may be to not eat at the electronic poll book table. So if you are a poll book officer, you do not want to eat at the poll book table, you can have something to drink. And make sure that your drink has a cap on it that you can close so you're not spilling it into the electronic poll book. You want to limit your conversations so that the voter always comes first. Make sure you're checking outside to make sure if someone is there that needs assistance that you can assist them. So these are some of the things that you need to be reminded of on election day. The next thing you need to know is that there are persons allowed inside the polling place besides the officers of elections, besides the voters. So authorized representatives, those are party representatives, are allowed inside the polling place on election day. They have to have a letter of authorization, but they are allowed to be inside to observe the voting process on election day. They cannot interfere with the voting process, but they are allowed there to make sure that nothing is happening in the polling place that is against the law or there is a problem. Of course, qualified voters can be in the polling place. Candidates can come inside the polling place for at least 10 minutes per day. So they can come inside, but only one time during election day for 10 minutes. Minors age 15 or younger accompanying their parents may come inside the polling place. The news media is allowed inside the polling place. If the news media comes inside the polling place, they should only be talking to the chief officer of election. They should not film anyone who doesn't want to be filmed, and they cannot interfere with the voting process. They cannot interview anyone inside the polling place. If they interview someone, that person has to step outside of the polling place and outside of the 40-foot prohibited area in order to be interviewed by the media, and any neutral observers that are authorized by myself or the electoral board are allowed inside the polling place on election day. Inside the election day guide, you will also find information on assisting voters with disabilities. Always ask if the voter wants assistance. Everyone doesn't want assistance. Always be courteous and respectful to the voter, and make sure you speak directly to the voter and not the person that may be with them assisting them. Some do's and don'ts of campaigners and authorized representatives. There are some things that they should not be doing. If you have individuals who are outside workers passing out campaign literature, they cannot impede the voter. They cannot make the voter take their campaign literature. They are allowed to talk to and engage with the voter to provide information about their candidate, but they cannot force anyone to stop and speak with them. They must remain outside the 40-foot prohibited area. During a primary election, there are special instructions that you need to know about primaries. So some polling places will have a dual party primary at times. And for this election, you will have a dual party primary. A dual party primary simply means that there are two separate elections occurring at the same time and in the same location. So it would be a Republican primary and a Democratic primary. If there is a dual party primary in a polling place, the voter must indicate which ballot they want to receive because you have no way of knowing. However, if it's a primary and it's only a single party primary, then anyone who comes into the polling place will receive the ballot for that primary. For this particular election, it's a Republican primary in some polling places. In other polling places, it's a dual primary. So you may have individuals, if you issue them the ballot, they're not paying attention. You don't tell them that it's a Republican primary. They get to the voting booth and they realize, I don't know any of these people. I don't want this ballot. Then they can, they may abandon the ballot and the ballot will become a voided ballot, or they may just vote the ballot or vote a blank ballot. However, if it's a polling place that has a dual primary, the voter has the opportunity to change their mind up until the point they put that ballot into the scanner. So if you issue them a Democratic ballot, if they're not paying attention, they take the Democratic ballot, they go over to the voting booth, or they've asked for a Democratic ballot and they realize, yeah, maybe I don't want to vote this ballot. So they can then indicate to the voting booth officer, hey, I don't want this ballot. They get back in line, come back to you, they return that ballot to you. If the ballot's not marked, of course, you can just put the ballot back. If the ballot is marked, you would have to spoil that ballot. You would uncheck the voter from that primary and check them into the other primary and issue them a new ballot. So you would need the chief's password to override and uncheck them and check them into the next primary. Make sure you wear comfortable clothes and shoes during the day. Dress in layers. Of course, you never know what the weather's going to be. So if you're working outside the polls, bring a jacket. Just in the event that it may rain, bring food and drink and your medication, because you're not allowed to leave the polling place unless you are given permission by the electoral board. Of course, in the case of an emergency, you would let the chief officer know that you have an emergency, if it's a medical emergency or some other emergency, and then they will notify us that you had to leave and it was an emergency. You also have another reference document that's called a what if. So it's a what to do when is what it says on the front of the document. So what to do when there is a problem with a voter, basically, is how I like to say that this reference guide works. It goes through photo identification issues. So if the voter must have a photo ID to vote on election day, if it has a date, it cannot be expired for more than 12 months. The voter only needs one identification, so they don't need to show you multiple identifications. They only need one valid ID. The ID does not have to have an address. However, if it does have an address, the address does not have to match the address that's in the poll book. The voter is stating their name and address. That is the address that you use to qualify them, not the address that's on the ID. If the voter has poll book issues, that's also addressed in the what if. So a voter may not be on your poll book for whatever reason. If that voter has moved, not changed their address, or the voter is new to the county and they never registered to vote, there may be many reasons why this voter has an issue where they are not on your poll book, or they're flagged as inactive or having a confirmation mailing. The answer to those questions and how to handle those voters is found in your what if document. The what if goes over information about provisional ballots. So provisional ballots are used when we're unable to determine a voter's eligibility on election day. So that means that they're there, the chief officer has contacted our office, we have researched the voter, we've looked up the voter in the statewide database, we've looked for voter registration applications that may have come in after the deadline, and we are unable to determine whether or not this voter should be able to vote in your precinct on election day. So a provisional ballot is fail-safe voting. It allows that voter to cast their ballot, put it into an envelope, and it comes back to our office. The voter then has the opportunity to provide the evidence that is needed to determine whether or not they're eligible to vote in Chesterfield County. So that's what a provisional ballot is. Provisional ballots are not counted on election day. They're not checked into the electronic poll book, and they cannot and should not be inserted into the optical scanner in the polling place. If the voter votes a provisional ballot, they are actually marking a ballot and putting it into an envelope. They're never checked into the poll book. Of course, they have a poll book issue, so they shouldn't be in the poll book anyway. However, there are some voters who are in the poll book, but they have an issue. So you can check them in, but you should not be checking in a provisional voter in your poll book. So your poll book may have absentee voters, someone who has requested a ballot through the mail, and they decided for whatever reason they don't want to vote that ballot. So they show up in the polling place and they do not bring their ballot with them. If they do not bring their ballot with them, they have to vote a provisional ballot. We are unable to issue them a ballot and allow them to vote on the scanner, because we have no way of knowing whether or not that ballot has been returned to the office and will be counted in our central absentee precinct. So to prevent the voter from voting twice, we have to issue them a provisional ballot. However, if the voter comes in on election day and they requested a ballot through the mail and they bring their ballot into the polling place, then the chief officer can take that ballot, make sure that it is a valid ballot, that ballot for the election that they're trying to vote in. The chief officer would then void that ballot and put it into envelope number 4, override the voter, and allow you to check them in and issue them a ballot, and they would vote as any other normal voter in your polling place on election day. There's also a document that the chief officer has, the Officer of Election Positions. It goes through defining each job duty that you could have in the polling place on election day. The demonstration officer is the officer who is at the entrance to the polling place next to the table that has the board with the information of sample ballots, um, information about identification, how to mark your ballot. So they're there to assist voters who come in, especially new voters who've never voted before, to guide them through the process. And then they would then go to the electronic poll book officer, who would then look them up in the poll book, which is a laptop with a poll book application on it that houses the voter registration list for the state, for the county of Chesterfield. So they would look the voter up in your polling place, check them in. The ballot officer then would issue the voter a ballot. If it is a primary election and it's a dual primary, the ballot officer would issue the ballot for the appropriate primary. And the electronic poll book officer would let the ballot officer know which primary the voter is actually requesting to vote in, because they are actually checked into the poll book as either voting Democratic or Republican. The optical scanner, a ballot counter officer, is the officer who assists voters with putting their ballot in the scanner. If for some reason they have an issue with their ballot and the message comes up on the screen that it's a blank ballot, they overvoted their ballot, then the ballot officer, ballot counter officer, or optical scanner officer will assist them and help them understand their options and what they need to do with that ballot, so they can either cast the ballot, or if they've spoiled the ballot, they can be reissued another ballot. And that's what the scanner officer is there for. They're also there kind of to watch and make sure individuals do not leave a polling place with a ballot in hand. The forms officer, who sometimes is the chief officer or the deputy chief officer, is the individual who's helping the voters with the provisional balloting process, or helping voters fill out any paperwork. If they have a problem with the poll book, they need to update their address, filling out the affirmation of eligibility, the voter registration application. This is the individual who handles the forms throughout the day. They keep them in order and they put them in the appropriate envelopes to be returned to the office. The express vote officer is usually a floater who's going between a couple of different things, because we do not have a lot of individuals at this time that use the express vote. The express vote is the accessible voting equipment in the polling place. The voting booth officer is the individual who's guiding individuals to an open voting booth, privacy voting booth, so that they can mark their ballot. They also make sure that if there's any campaign literature left behind, that they're removing the campaign literature from the voting booths and making sure that they are clean. The floater, it can be an inside and outside floater. So if it's someone that's an outside floater, they can be assigned as an outside polls officer. And so the outside polls officer will be assisting voters who want to vote curbside. This is the demonstration board that the demonstration officer will direct voters' attention to. The yellow document is the sample ballot. So you would have a sample ballot for the actual precinct or polling place that you're working in. If there is a dual party primary in an actual polling place, then you will see two sample ballots, a sample ballot for each primary that is being held in the polling place. Voting instructions, instructions on how to mark the ballot, information on just asking voters to be courteous with cell phone use in the polling place, and then the voter, are you ready? Are you ID ready? Providing some information on acceptable forms of ID. This is the individual that is placed at the front of the polling place. So provisional ballots, we have basically we have three types of provisional ballots. So there's a regular provisional ballot. You use this, it's a mint green envelope to address problems with voters who are not on the poll book, voters who may have address issues, or those absentee voters who come back to the polling place to vote without their ballot. There's the ID only provisional, which is the lime green provisional envelope, and this is used for individuals who do not have a valid identification on election day. What makes it not valid? Why would someone show up without a valid identification? Well, there are a few reasons for that. So if the voter just moved to the state of Virginia, they moved to Chesterfield County, they met the deadline, they were able to register to vote. However, they were not able to get their driver's license updated to get a new driver's license for Chesterfield County or for the state of Virginia. That person will come into the polling place. They're actually on your poll book. However, their ID is an ID from another state. It is not valid. That person will then be allowed to vote a provisional ballot, but it's an ID only provisional ballot. So they mark their ballot and they put it in a lime green envelope. They fill out the front, sign it, and then they're given a document, a notification to let them know what they need to do in order for their ballot to count. So they simply need to provide a copy of their ID by the Friday after the election, noon on that Friday, in order for their ballot to count. And if for some reason they just cannot provide a copy of an ID, they can come into our office and we can take a photo for them for voting purposes only. They come in and their ID is expired more than 12 months. It's not valid anymore. So then you want to allow them to vote a provisional ballot. And then they can, of course, get that information into us by noon the Friday after the election for their ballot to vote. And then there's the regular and ID only provisional voters where they have an address problem or an absentee issue, and they also don't have a valid ID. So they vote a regular provisional ballot, which is the mint green, but the reasons on the back, you're going to check two reasons instead of one. And so this is what the provisional ballot envelopes look like. The front part, the voter is going to fill out, and the officer of election completes. Voter signs it, and these are the reason codes on the back that the voter is voting absentee. So this is a regular provisional voter. They have an address problem, so they're not on the poll book. You're going to check the reason for that. They also don't have an ID, so you check the reason they're not on the poll book. And then you check at the very bottom, the voter doesn't have an ID as well. So you're going to check both of those reasons if they have two problems. The other absentee issue, if they come into the polling place, they do not bring their absentee ballot, but they're marked on the poll book as voting absentee, you're going to check box number 4 as absentee voter. They still need to fill out all the same information because they are a provisional voter. They also need to fill out a voter registration application. And they are provided the notice or notices that they need that corresponds to the provisional information that's on the back of the envelope. And for your ID only provisional voters, their envelope is lime green. So it doesn't have the information on the back to check boxes because it's a singular purpose envelope. It's the only purpose it serves is to identify the voter as an voter who didn't have a valid ID. To fill out the front of the form, they sign it, officer of election signs. Then you were going to place those small green envelopes into a larger 1A envelope. So all your provisional ballots, the small ones, go into this larger 1A envelope. Then on the back of the envelope, your chief officer or deputy chief will certify the number of provisional ballots that are inside this envelope, and they will sign it. Each voter that is issued a provisional ballot must be placed on a provisional ballot log. So you list them on the provisional ballot log as being issued a provisional ballot, get all of their information, the last four of their social, and circle the reason or reasons that the individual has been issued a provisional ballot. And then any information that will assist us in qualifying a voter should be placed in the notes section on a provisional ballot log. So other forms that you will use on election day are the voter registration application. So you use that to register voters who may or may not be registered to vote, or to update their voter registration information. The affirmation of eligibility form allows voters to affirm, number one, that they may not have moved, but they've been flagged as moving. They may not have moved, so they're going to use the affirmation of eligibility to certify that, hey, I've never moved, I should be eligible to vote in this precinct. Then you would use the affirmation of eligibility form to actually update voters' information. If they have moved within a certain period of time, they would use this form to update their information. The request for assistance form is used when you have a voter who needs assistance in marking their ballot. Now, if you use any of these forms on election day, you need to check the flag in the electronic poll book in the voter's record before the voter actually votes. So if they need to complete a voter registration application, an affirmation of eligibility, or a request for assistance form, that information needs to be completed before that voter is allowed to vote. So you should not be checking anyone in that the chief officer or deputy chief has not informed you that the appropriate information has been completed. So there's an election day oath that the chief officer will administer first thing in the morning, which is a record of everyone working in the election on election day. So there is an oath for each election. There's a yellow printed return sheet that everyone in the polling place must sign, and a statement of results that everyone in the polling place must sign. So the election day oath, the yellow printed return sheet, and the statement of results has a signature of every officer working in the precinct on election day. I'll say outside polls and curbside voting. So anyone who has a physical disability or they are 65 or older is eligible to vote curbside. They can vote outside the polls in their car. They must be within 150 feet of the entrance of the polling place. You will emulate the voter, so the voter will not be going into the poll book officer to check themselves in. So if you are the outside polls voter officer attending to the voter, you want to make sure that you have them state their full name and address, and you write the information down. You then check their identification. When you go into the polling place, you go to the poll book officer, you're going to provide them the information that the voter provided to you. Now, just keep in mind that if it's a primary election and it's a dual party primary, so it's a Republican and Democratic primary, that you need to ascertain that information from the voter before going inside to the poll book officer, because the poll book officer needs that information to check the voter in. Then the voter will then issue the ballot for the appropriate primary if it is actually a dual party primary in the precinct. So you allow the voter to mark their ballot in a private manner, and you complete any necessary paperwork, affirmations of assistance, requests for assistance, voter registration applications, anything that is required for the voter voting in the car. And then you take the ballot that is marked by the voter and you insert it into the optical scanner. Okay, so this is the part of the presentation where we will review the equipment operation videos.
Move the cage into position and lock the two cage wheels. Unlock the padlock on the cage and open the doors wide, securing them with the door holders on the top of each side of the cage. Remove the sign, vote-o-matics, and other items from the cage that would interfere with removal of the vote counter. Remember, the vote counter cannot be set up on Monday. It can only be set up on Election Day morning. Before trying to move the vote counter, open the door of the ballot bin and remove the ballots inside. These are your ballots for the election and should be properly secured at all times. Close and lock the ballot bin door. Two people should be ready to remove the vote counter from the cage. Slide the vote counter to the left to the center of the cage. Each person should then grasp the two handles on each side of the vote counter. A slight lift will be necessary to get over a small lip at the bottom of the cage. Remove the vote counter and place it on the floor and move it into position. Move the vote counter to the cage and verify that the wheels of the cage are locked. Two people should grasp the handles on each side of the vote counter and lift the vote counter and place it into the center of the cage. Slide the vote counter all the way to the right. The sticker this side facing out should be seen. Place the Votomatic signs and other supplies into the cage. When all supplies are in the cage that should be, close the doors, lock the cage with the padlock, and move the cage to the proper location for pickup. Position the vote counter and plug it into the electrical plug. Open both ballot bin doors and the emergency ballot bin and ensure they are all empty. Close and lock after doing so. With the vote counter plugged into electricity, unlock and raise the lid. The vote counter will activate automatically. If it does not, check your written instructions for the procedure to manually activate. A password screen may appear, in which case the password will have to be entered using the keyboard on the screen. If needed, the password will be in your written instructions. Then press the Accept button on the screen. If no password appears, then don't worry about it. The configuration report will print. While it is printing, visually confirm the precinct number in the upper left of the screen is correct and confirm that the public count at the top center is 0. Next, press the Open Poll button on the screen, at which the 0 tape will print. Officers should sign the 0 tape and leave it attached to the vote counter. Roll up the paper and secure with a paper clip, ensuring it is out of the ballot path. Next, press Go to Voting mode on the screen and the vote counter is ready to accept ballots. Voters insert their own ballots and should be told to do so face down. If there is a problem with the ballot being accepted, it can be inserted long ways in any configuration. If a voter has overvoted, the vote counter will pause and show on the screen all of the offices that have been overvoted. If there are too many overvotes for one screen, a Next button will appear, and that will be pressed until all overvoted offices have been displayed. A Return and a Cast button will then appear. An inquiry of the voter will have to be made, and if the overvote is in error, press Return. If it is deliberate, or if the voter has already left the polling place, then press Cast. If a voter enters a blank ballot, the vote counter will pause to confirm whether to return or cast, similar to an overvoted ballot with no additional display. When the polls are ready to be closed and all voters have voted, check the emergency ballot bin for ballots. If they are present, insert them into the vote counter. When ready to close the polls, open the door on the top left side of the vote counter and press the Close Polls button, holding it down for 5 seconds. Next, press the Close Poll button on the screen. 3 results tapes will then begin printing. Once the first tape is printed, tear it off and report to the office. This tape, which will include the configuration report and the 0 tape, as well as a copy of the results tape, should be attached to the SOR for the registrar. After the second and third result tapes have printed, a write-in report will be printed. This write-in report must be separated from the third results tape and attached to the SOR for the registrar. Next, press the Finished button on the screen, after which the machine will shut down. Close and lock the lid. Remove ballots from both ballot bins in the ballot box and rewrap the electrical cord at the rear of the vote counter. Return the vote counter to the cage for loading. Remove the express vote case from the top shelf of the cage and place it on the table. Unzip the top cover and carefully remove the express vote from the case. Retrieve the power supply from the side pouch of the case and the headphones from their storage location. Carefully lay the express vote face down on the table and extend the support stand on the back. Insert the round end of the power supply cable into the express vote. This may be easier to accomplish sitting down at the table. Be sure to identify the top of the round end of the power supply cable as being square with two arrows on it. Once the power supply cable is inserted, stand up the express vote, confirming the express vote stands on its own with the extended support stand. Connect the power supply to the electrical plug. Open the small door on the left side of the express vote with the round key. Confirm that the voter official switch is in the voter position. Set the power switch to on. Close and lock the door using care to properly position the cable leading to the keypad in the cutout portion of the door. While the machine is booting up, attach the headphones and remove the keypad from the left side and place it on the table. The express vote will present a screen requiring an election code. Enter the election code as provided in the written instructions. Use care in typing the election code. Confirm each letter or number or special character as it is entered. The election code is case sensitive, so press the shift key for capital letters or special characters, such as the exclamation point. Once the election code is entered, press the accept button on the screen. If it reports an error, press the clear button and try again. After 3 unsuccessful tries, the express vote will shut down and you will have to restart. Activation of the express vote ballot occurs when the ballot card is inserted. The ballot card must be inserted with the cut corner in the upper right. Once the ballot card is inserted, follow the screen prompts or audio commands to reach the actual ballot. Navigation of the express vote by the voter is like the previously used automark machine. When the voter is finished and the ballot card is printed, the ballot card is removed from the express vote and inserted into the DS200 using the guide on top of the new ballot guide. The ballot card may be inserted in any configuration into the DS200 using the top guides on the new ballot guide. When the polls are closed and all voters have voted, open the small door on the left side of the express vote using the round key and move the power switch to off. Reattach the keypad to the lower left side with the Velcro. Disconnect the headphones. Carefully lay the express vote face down on the table and disconnect the power supply cable. Note that the square just below the round interface of the power supply cable must slide down before it will disconnect from the express vote. Please do not force removal of the cable, which will damage the express vote. Park the support stand by pushing it in. Store the express vote back into its case. Place the power supply into the side pouch. Store the headphones according to written instructions. Secure the case by closing the top cover and zipping it shut. Store the express vote case on the top shelf of the cage. To launch the electronic poll book, locate the Advocate PCC icon on the desktop and double-click it. This will bring up the import screen on which you click Browse, and the thumb drive in the laptop will automatically be recognized, as will the file on it, the poll book file. So answer yes to the question, and the import of the election will then begin. This process will take a few minutes, which is why we advise to set up the electronic poll books early in the polling place setup process. Connect all the cables, plug all the devices in, insert the thumb drive, and then turn on the electronic poll books and begin this election import so it can be going on while other things are being set up in the polling place. Once the import is complete, the login screen will appear. Enter your user ID into the login screen and click Login. On first login, the recognition of the thumb drive again will occur to be used as the location to store backup data. Answer yes to that. You'll be presented this screen to adjust time if necessary. Just click Open Poll Book there. And the next screen will be the actual voter search screen, the screen that is used to look up a voter who presents themselves to vote. This is the voter search screen. When a voter comes in and announces their name and address and presents their identification, you can begin typing their name, last name into the search box. Type a last name in, comma, and then you can put a first name, begin typing a first name. You note we have Jones J. At the bottom here, we have one with an AB, which indicates an absentee voter, not one that you should expect to present themselves to vote. If that happens, refer it to the Chief Officer of Election. But when you identify the voter who's standing before you, click on their name. Once you've validated their ID, they're ready to check in. Just click on the Check Voter In button, then click on the Confirm button on the other side of the screen, and the voter's now checked in, and the background color of their information turns red to signal that they have indeed been checked in. Then click Clear, and you're ready to search the next voter. Soon the next voter's name is Smith, perhaps John Smith. So we put that in, and we find no search results. In the upper right, you have Search Scope, Precinct, and All. If you don't find a voter, you can click on All, which then goes from the voter list for your precinct to the voter list for the entire locality. There you can perhaps find the John Smith that you were looking for and refer them to their proper precinct. In this case, we see it is 108 Ecoff. Note that the Check Voter In button is grayed out, so we cannot check in a voter in our precinct who is not assigned to our precinct. In this situation, then go back to the list, click Clear, and it defaults back to precinct search. So the next time you search, you are searching just in the precinct. Note here a voter with a yellow triangle next to their name instead of a green check mark. We hover over that. We see we have a question mark and an H, an inactive voter whose address needs to be confirmed, and H is a personal ID required under federal requirements. And the voter ID chart will help you there in determining what ID is appropriate. A voter with a yellow triangle is not prohibited from voting, just other things must occur with that voter as they check in and as you complete the processing of them. Sometimes with complex last names, it may be advantageous just to search by first name, in which case you can put a comma and then type in the first name, and it will provide all the last names that match that first name. Kind of a handy trick, again, when there are maybe a complex last name. At the end of the night, go to the Options button in the lower left corner, click on it, click Close or Suspend Poll, then click Close Poll. This requires a password from a Chief Officer of Election who will enter their password, because once an electronic poll book is closed, it cannot be reopened. And once any one is indicated to close on a connection, all of them on the connection are then automatically closed. Concurrent with closing of the polls and closing of the electronic poll book, data is exported to each thumb drive, which is then removed from the laptop, placed in its specified container, and delivered to the registrar's office. A message occurs that the device was closed, information was exported, click OK, and now the electronic poll books are all closed. Use of the electronic poll book is indeed as simple as it has seemed in this demonstration. It is a great tool that allows us to check voters in very quickly.
So to summarize what we have talked about throughout this training, you want to arrive at the polling place no later than 5 a.m. That gives you guys time to get all of the equipment set up, all of the signs posted inside and outside of the polling place, get your assignments of what you're going to be doing throughout the day if they have not already been assigned to you before election day. So 5 a.m. is a good hour before the polls open to give you guys time to get all set up. Always follow the chief officer's instructions, especially as it pertains to checking individuals into the poll book, making sure that you're handling situations at the scanner properly, not allowing voters to walk out of the precinct with a ballot, giving them the correct information that appears on the screen or what's going on to make sure that voters have confidence in the voting process. You want to make sure you follow whatever the chief officer is instructing you to do. It is also important that you follow the chief's instructions when it comes to emergency procedures, emergency evacuations, sheltering in place. Make sure the chief officer knows where you are at all times. If you're taking a break, let the chief know that either you're going to go outside and take your break or you're going to be taking your break inside the building in the event that something happens and they need to do a head count. Every action has a legal consequence. Do not act because it seems like common sense. You may be breaking the law. So everything that is common sense that seems right may not be what is written in the Code of Virginia and the way that we have to handle that situation. Make sure every voter has a good experience on election day. Try to make sure that you have a good experience on election day. It should be fun. It's not going to be too busy during primary seasons. General elections are usually a lot busier. For most people, the busier they are, the better it is. So have a good day. Make sure you have a good experience on election day. Learn as much as possible. We're always recruiting individuals to move up to leadership positions as deputy chief and chief officers. So there's always an opportunity to move into a different role. Remember to bring food and to dress appropriately. Sign all the necessary forms before leaving the polling place and study the material provided. I do not expect you to know everything um, from the material. I do not expect you to remember everything from this training, but I do expect you to remember that the voter comes first, that the chief officer is in charge, and that you don't want to do anything that may appear like you're breaking the law, and just have a good day on election day. Thank you so much for volunteering to serve. So that concludes the presentation for new officers of elections in the real world environment when we're not online. There is also the opportunity for hands-on voting equipment training. Hopefully, you will be able to take advantage of that at some point so that you can understand how to get the voting equipment all set up, logged in, troubleshoot any issues that may occur on election day. So the more familiar you are and everyone in the polling place is with the equipment and how to troubleshoot and get everything corrected, the more comfortable the voter will be on election day as well. So the quiz will be provided to you. Make sure you take that quiz so that we can certify that you did attend training. And I hope that you just have a great day. The electoral board and I are so grateful that you have taken the time out of your busy day, number one, to actually go through this training, and number two, to serve as an officer of election on election day. Thank you so much and have a great election.